shouldn't we work in tandem? Shouldn't we work together? Shouldn't we get the funds what we are supposed to get? And at least the 20% of amount of funds
You're
which you
making it
promised
a
to get,
political
you're getting.
slugfest instead of having a financial argument. You're vitiating the atmosphere, which only makes it worse.
Today, if the Prime Minister of the country is coming to Bangalore, we welcome him. But other than posing or giving pictures for the yellow line, he should provide the funds for the 11,495 crores, which the state government is due.
Okay, let me answer that question very quickly because this Finance Commission argument keeps coming up again and again. During the UPA time, the state's share in the divisible pool was a mere 29%. States got only 29%. It was risen to 42% first and 41% under the Modi government. So that argument is completely false. And it was Siddaramaiya as Chief Minister in 2018 who went in front of the Finance Commission.
Are you a Bangalorean and a Karnataka first? Are you a Karnataka first?
It is our duty to get the money to our state government. Please don't speak over me. It is the Chief Minister's representation. He has to represent us correctly in front of the Finance Commission. He has failed. I just wanted to tell one last thing. With respect to Bengaluru, nobody wants to hear these excuses, credit wars anymore. Nobody wants to hear it. They want proactive governance. It was BJP's actionable, proactive governance that allowed for this to happen. 0 kilometers were actually tendered during their time. It was during the BJP time this was happened.
If you are seeing any development in the state of Karnataka, it's all the development, the capital work, whatever is been done by Government of India. Let it be any highways across the state of Karnataka. Let it start from Bidar till Chamarajanagar or any part of the state. With regard to the road development, with regard to the railway tracks, or with regard to the port development, you name the infrastructure, let it be houses for the poor people. What was not done in the entire history of 65 years, within 10 years, we could build 4 crore houses. What was built in 65 years, it was only 3 crore houses. Drinking water, each and every houses. Under the Jal Jeevan Mission, even the drinking water was not provided. Even with regard to my good friend Lavanya was talking about the healthcare. You should see the state of affairs. After coming to the power, even after 2 years, 4 months, they were not even able to procure minimum essential drugs. After 2.5 years, now they are providing money because the house is going to come up. We are going to question. They have killed the pregnant women. There's no health care. They are just they're just not done anything. Even with regard to the health mission. Even with regard to the health mission.
No, as a doctor, I don't think he should make that statement.
The money.
I don't, as a doctor, he cannot make the statement that we killed pregnant women.
Yes,
sir, it was the drug, the lactate ring drug that is responsible for the... No.
Knowingly they have administered the Ringer lactate, IV fluid. They are nothing but the murderers.
No.
There's no doubt about it.
Okay, if I may respond.
Various programs.
You would have given
No, let me respond. When he's
comment was
talking about the pregnant, the lactating women who died, the Karnataka government made it very clear to the central laboratory that the lactate ring is the reason that we find these women are dying. And the central laboratory refused the statement saying, no, for us, according to the tests, this is not the reason. So we have banned those drugs right now in Karnataka. While we are talking about the hospitals, do not scream. Do not scream.
Okay.
Do not scream at me.
Everyone calm. Everyone calm. No.
Even then they have administered.
No.
Okay.
Let me complete my
I'll
statement.
give
Doctor, you cannot
I will give everyone a closing word.
statements. You cannot make misleading statements. No, you cannot. You cannot. I can scream too. You cannot make misleading statements.
Okay.
I would like to say
finish your last point.
Even in the floor of the house, when they made an allegation, they were not able to even respond. Full silence. They had no answer.
Let Lavanya finish her point. Let her finish her point.
I
She
would
has the
like
right
to
finish
say,
her point.
I think Dr. Ashwath Narayan cannot refuse that there was a huge COVID scam, unimaginable amount of COVID scam in
Even after
Karnataka.
2.5 years.
There was no
Even after,
oxygen
where
in
is
Chamarajanagar for
Michael
100
Dikuna's
people.
report?
People
Where
died.
is that report?
32
Why no
people
action?
died in
Where is
Chamarajanagar
Mr.
without
Dikuna's report?
oxygen.
You are in government.
And I'm
Where
sorry,
is Mikhail
we are
Dikuna?
investigating. Madam, please read out.
Let him come on.
Investigation is going on. You are uneducated about the issue. Don't scream.
I think television
After
anchors
2.5 years, they have got no answer.
are quiet and are speaking at a much lower voice. So I think that's the lesson right now, that we are enjoying our masala dosa. We are enjoying
Look, this is a very serious issue, folks. There is no doubt about it. These are issues that affect the common Bengalurian. But I would completely second what Veeraraghav has said. As television anchors reporting on these serious issues, I have never been so quiet. And I'm happy to be quiet in such august company, frankly. So I'm going to bring this to an end. I think we can go on the whole day. I think we've proven that. There are people watching us all around here at Chalukya Samrat as well. So thank you very much to all of you for being with me. My only hope, and I'm going to end with the point that we made at the beginning, which Veera I think made, is that the people hope for accountability. The people hope that projects are delivered on time. I think as Indians, we are accustomed to things like credit wars. We are accustomed to it. We are a noisy, chaotic democracy, even though I don't like constantly using that as a reason to blame the things that happen in this country. But projects should happen on time. When we're talking about such huge money, colossal sums of money being spent on, a few tens of kilometers of project way in a metro, I think the least that a Bengalurian would expect is that things actually happen on time. Bengalurians are big-hearted. They are incredibly progressive people. They will forgive the politicians for the finger-pointing and the crossfire. But they say, please give me my metro on time. So therefore, this new orange line, is it the orange line, Veera?
orange
Is the next one.
blue and then pink.
So there's orange, there's blue and pink. There's a whole rainbow of lines coming up before Bengaluru can really be called a number metro city. But I hope the next one actually happens on time. And maybe we'll do the next one riding on that metro. Thank you so much to all of you for being with me. And thank you so much for watching.
The Indian Air Force chief has gone on the record to say that the Indian Air Force managed to knock down 6 Pakistan Air Force aircraft, including 1 possible airborne early warning and control aircraft, as well as an unspecified number of F-16 fighters possibly on the ground, in addition to another large aircraft, possibly an electronic intelligence aircraft. It's the first time that the Indian military has gone on record and put numbers to its kills in the Pakistan Air Force. Joining me live now is Tom Cooper, easily the most well-known and most well-regarded aerial warfare analyst and historian. Tom, always good to have you. Thank you very much for your time here on NDTV. What did you make, your opening thoughts, Tom, on the Indian Air Force chief's claim that 6 Pakistan Air Force aircraft, including 5 fighters and 1 possible early warning aircraft, were knocked out, one of them at least by an S-400 missile?
Hello, Shi. Thank you very much for inviting me. Nice to be with you today. Opening words, well, for me, as following this in detail, there was not that much of surprise, if at all, then that he was actually talking about Pakistani aircraft shot down by Indian air defenses, which means by missiles fired from the ground, not in air combat. So we are still waiting for Indian Air Force's assessment in this regard. But on the other hand, it was nice to have plenty of things we have seen between 7th of May and 10th of May de facto confirmed by Air Chief Marshal.
He also spoke, Tom, about a very, very long-range interception by an S-400 system. He talked about how this was a possible early warning aircraft and that it was an S-400 that killed it at a range of about 300 kilometers. He also said that this is a record of sorts in aerial warfare, warfare in general, where such a long-range intercept has taken place. What did you think of that? Tell us your thoughts about such a long-range intercept that the Indian Air Force chief spoke about.
Yes, well, from what I know, the Indian Air Force was tracking the activity of Pakistani Air Force Sub 2000 AWACS for all the time, actually already before the fighting began in this form. And it knew that this is in an orbit, relatively lengthy orbit on north, almost north to south axis, around 300 kilometers away from Amritsar, west of Amritsar. So it moved one of its firing units, S-400 firing units, into a position quite close to the border, which was of course very risky, because the unit moved within a range of Pakistani artillery. So Pakistanis could have fired back on it if something would have gone wrong. And the unit also positioned itself at one of the local hills to have a better elevation, because the higher up the radar and the firing unit, the better for the action, for the operations of the missile. And as far as I know, it fired from some 308 to 312 kilometers away, and it fired at least 4 missiles. This is what is known also from videos shown on, for example, in Pakistan that evening, because they thought that India was firing ballistic missiles into Pakistan. And then all of a sudden there was a video showing burning aircraft wreckage, burning on the ground inside Pakistan, so over 300 kilometers away from Indian border. So this was a clear confirmation that something was shot down, and Indian Air Force wouldn't be shooting, widely at anything. So this was a very well-planned, executed operation, aiming to drive the Pakistani AWACS as far away from the border as possible in order to deny them the opportunity to detect incoming Indian Air Force strikes, in order to deny them the opportunity to guide J-10s and JF-17s into intercepting incoming Indian fighter bombers, actually shooting at them already while they are inside the Indian airspace. And this was highly successful as far as I can assess, and from what I've heard from Indian contacts. So there is something, under apostrophe, something has happened to Pakistani Air Force, and it was a very painful blow for them. Sorry.
I agree with you, and the fact is that the S-400 in Indian service is hardly a secret, Tom. The whole world, and I'm sure Pakistan knew very well that India has the S-400. They probably had intelligence about where these are deployed. They would have had reasonably good data as far as the kind of range capabilities India's S-400 deployments would have had. They would have planned their airspace deployments accordingly. Given that China also has the S-400, I'm sure they would have had access to additional data in terms of the capabilities of this system. Keeping all of that in mind, Tom, what kind of a lapse do you think it would have taken for an advanced Pakistani aircraft to have been vulnerable and finally be knocked out by an S-400?
Well, primary question is whether the Indian Air Force unit in question was deploying its S-400s in a classic mode, which means obtain the radar picture, obtain the radar echo of the target, and then fire this radar echo and let the missile guide itself in the last something like 100 kilometers of its trajectory, because the missile, this is a very big missile. It's almost as big as a Jaguar fighter bomber. So this missile has an active radar homing head, and it's activating this radar homing head in the final phase of its flight. So this is the one option. The other option is that they have, I don't know exactly whether there is such a variant, but theoretically such an option exists, which means that one is setting up the missile to strike on radar signals from the aircraft in question, or any kind of other electronic emissions, for example, jamming, disturbing signals. or signals which are meant to disturb the work of Indian Air Force Forces radars. So one of these three options is there, and the Indian Air Force has deployed perhaps, this missile is big enough to enable all the three of these options. It has seeker heads to enable the installation of all the three types of seeker heads. So it is possible that it was, unleashed on all-out style, and whatever happens, the missile was ready or capable of targeting such an aircraft over such a distance. And it scored, not whether it was one or a set. There were at least 4 missiles were seen, and the Pakistanis were reporting ballistic missiles. One of these 4 has detonated closely enough to the target, or even scored a direct hit, slamming the aircraft into the ground, down to the ground. So this is the point. Now, exactly details, Indian Air Force is very unlikely to go into such details for the next 5 to 10 years at least. Specifically in what mode was the missile fired, or where the missiles fired. But especially since it worked. You do not want, in modern warfare, electronic warfare is everything. You do not want to reveal such details to the enemy, to the opponent. And the Operation Sindhu is still going on, even less so is anybody from the Indian Air Force going to go into details in these regards. So it is one of the 3 options. Perhaps one of them worked, perhaps all 3 worked. We don't know right now, we are going to see.
Tom, an aircraft like the Saab 2000 Area-I airborne early warning and control aircraft, these are force multiplier aircraft. Pakistan only has a handful of them. There is reason to believe that at least one of them was knocked out by an S-400, as you've said as well. As an aerial warfare specialist, the public would also like to understand and know from you what it must have been like, in the cockpit of some of those Pakistani aircraft, having an S-400 come out at you. Would there have been knowledge that these missiles were coming at them? Would there have been, incoming warnings? Would there have been evasive, maneuvers? Can you paint us a picture of that?
You have to imagine the following situation. Radars installed on aircraft can pick up ballistic missiles, so missiles which are fired almost straight into the sky already since 1980s at least. This is no big secret. So the question is then, what happens next? Can one act against this? Does one recognize this as a ballistic missile, which means surface-to-surface missile, or is it a surface-to-air missile? This is probably the biggest issue in that case, or was the biggest issue in the case. The Pakistanis have almost certainly detected the missiles flying in their direction. And the question was then, how did they recognize them? Did they recognize them as a threat or not? One way or the other, Saab 2000 is a high-flying aircraft, but also slow aircraft. It's a turboprop. It cannot accelerate to some kind of speeds, and it cannot also maneuver particularly hard to avoid the missile. And even if such missiles can pull, 10, 20 Gs without any kind of a problem. No human can survive such pulling so many Gs. So it is impossible to avoid. The only theoretical possibility would have been to rapidly descend and deploy chaff in order to disturb the work of the missile seeker head. But again, it's a big missile, it has a big seeker head, which means it has a long range, and it has lots of energy capacity in it installed, which means its emissions are very powerful. They can burn through the enemy's jamming of radar signals. And this is what most likely happened. And if it cannot burn through with its own radar emissions through the enemy jamming, it can switch to the seeker head, seeking the most powerful source of electronic emissions and going after this source. In that case, it's the targeted aircraft again, which is emitting most of energy, electromagnetic energy, and the missile is heading after it. It's just almost like with nose sniffing the emissions from the enemy jammer or radar or whatever it was. So avoiding such a missile for such an aircraft is extremely complex. Which means for the crew it must have been very terrifying, because they knew the missiles were in flight. One shouldn't forget S-400 fired over such a distance are also traveling along ballistic trajectories, which means it's fired almost vertically and goes, ballistically towards the target. At some point in time, they must have recognized that they are targeted, at least when the missile activated its own active radar seeker, and from that moment onwards, it was terrifying for the Pakistani crew, because they knew they are directly targeted by a very powerful weapon, and there is very little they can do in order to evade. So this is for the crew of this Saab 2000. And for the rest of Pakistani Air Force, essentially, they knew that S-400 is a threat. They knew that several other weapons in the Indian Air Force's arsenal are a threat of similar capability. In some cases, they've tried to brave them, to continue their operations. In other cases, they have aborted their missions because of this threat. And the longer the war went on, the more they were aborting. The more serious attempt to continue operating despite such a threat were taking place on 9th of May. And sadly, it is very little is known really about what was going on 9th of May. What is known is that on 8th of May, they have lost 1 or 2 aircraft, probably F-16s, probably to S-400s, or more likely to short-ranged weapons in Pathankot sector. At least one was shot down, probably 2. And I think there was even a video showing possible capture of one of the pilots. We don't know, because Indian authorities wouldn't tell more. Point is, they knew that they're targeted by extremely dangerous weapon. They're facing an extremely capable opponent. And the longer this went on, the more threatening this became, because the less control over what is going on the Pakistani Air Force used to have, and the more control on the Indian side. And so the more they were operating through 8th and 9th of May, the more they knew that they do not know enough. What are they doing? What are they facing? Where are the positions of Indian Air Force air defenses? Where are the positions of Indian interceptors? From what side, from what direction could it happen that they are going to be targeted? So the situation became ever well, I'm searching for the word, ever more critical for Pakistani Air Force. And this is what contributed to the decision in Islamabad to sue for a ceasefire early on 10th of May.
Very interesting, and you've described, how intense things must have been between the 8th and the 9th, that things, were brought forward towards a ceasefire on the 10th of May. Tom, you mentioned the F-16. The Indian Air Force chief in his speech also mentioned the F-16, once or twice. It's the only fighter type he actually identified. We do know that Pakistan, operates a handful of different fighter types, not just the F-16. There's the J-10, there's the JF-17, a couple of Mirage types as well.
Yes.
Do you have a view or an assessment from everything you've seen, acknowledging that there's a great deal of fog, of what the Pakistan Air Force may have lost? The Indian Air Force chief said that, at least a few F-16s were knocked out both in the air and on the ground.
Well, from what I know, this is really sketchy, because I know about specific engagements which are pointing in direction of Pakistani Air Force kind of specializing its units and deploying them only for specific purposes. So F-16s, you have squadrons which are specialized in air-to-air, and you have squadrons, or at least parts of squadrons, which are specialized for air-to-ground operations. And in the case of JF-17s, they are mostly actually specialized in ground attack, and J-10s mostly for air-to-air. So, it depends on what situation, on which specific engagement are we talking about. I said I think it was on 8th of May. Sorry if I don't recall all the details precisely, because I'm currently going through all of this and reviewing it, but it's going to take some time, because I'm all the time receiving new details. So point is this: in the Pathankot sector, there was a combined strike, probably including F-16s, probably escorted by J-10s. I all the time have to say probably, because this is not so that as if you have models on a fashion show in Paris, but all these operations were undertaken from very long ranges, from ranges of at least 40, 50 kilometers. And through 8th of May, alone the fact that Pakistanis stopped trying to close to less than 40 kilometers from the Indian border is speaking its clear language. It says, something has happened to them at that point, because they couldn't get closer to the border without, facing a clear threat of being targeted, and not only targeted, but shot down as well. That's why I'm quite convinced that 1 or 2 F-16s have been shot down opposite on the Pakistani side, opposite to Pathankot, for example. Then there were. I don't know why the Pakistanis always so obsessed with Amritsar in particular. They have targeted it in 65, in 1973, now again. So there were also operations against this area, and they were really trying hard to deploying lots of electronic countermeasures and trying hard to get close enough to release their weaponry. And they were losing aircraft in the process, or had to abandon guiding their weaponry to their targets, jettison in many cases their weaponry, turn around and flee de facto, which is not something that Pakistani Air Force likes to do. But there was no other option, because they have been targeted by Indian Air Force, whether by Su-30s or Rafales, or by surface-to-air missiles like S-400s. The biggest problem in all of this was actually figuring out what is where on the Indian side of the border. They knew initially, on 7th of May, they knew approximate position of Indian air defenses. For example, S-400 here, Barak 8 is in this position, and something else, Spiders in this direction, and so on and so on. But through 8th and 9th of May, they started losing situational awareness, because Indian Air Force was striking their command centers and their radar systems, and they had ever less useful picture what is going on. So they had major problem just with figuring out, if they approach, for example, Amritsar, what can they expect, from what range, in what direction, and so on. Then they had problem with figuring out how shall they go through this onion, I call this onion of Indian air defenses, because, onions have layers. And so also Indian air defenses have layers. You have S-400, then you have this Israeli system, then you have Indian air defense system, then short-range Israeli and Indian systems. So whenever you manage to get through one layer of this onion, you just face another onion, another layer of the onion. And it was the same for the Pakistanis. On the contrary, their own system began falling apart, because they were hit so hard and so precisely that they were losing crucial people, and there were situations where their pilots would lose contact with ground control, for example, probably because the ground control center was hit by Indian Air Force. So what are you going to do now? Okay, you have your radar, you have your situational awareness on basis of onboard systems, but you don't have the big picture. You don't know what has hit the command and control center, and if such an object has been hit, boo. That is, this is a kind of shock for Pakistanis, because they are indoctrinated about their own superiority, and things of this kind cannot happen. And whatever else. So the point is, the situation was becoming ever more unpleasant for Pakistani Air Force, and also for top commanders of Pakistani armed services in general, because they have been targeted. Their headquarters have been targeted as well, which meant, and some of them have been killed as well. Not particularly well-known top commanders, or let's say some kind of popular persons, or whatever you want to describe them, but a number of them have been killed while on duty inside headquarters, inside underground facilities. So it became ever more and more unpleasant. And this is where then, obviously, you can deduct this from developments as you follow, if one follows them on 8th and the 9th of May in particular, one can deduct, it has reached a point of desperation, actually. That is when, then during the night from 9 to 10th, they have ordered, Islamabad has ordered the firing of 2 ballistic missiles at India. And then there was another shock when both of these were shot down probably also by S-400s. Probably. I again say probably because in this regard there is no information from India whatsoever. It could be, we are always talking about S-400s, this S-400s, that.
True, yeah.
But we shouldn't forget that Indian armed forces, both Air Force and the Army, have very powerful, as it turned out, very powerful, well-integrated air defense systems, capable of shooting down also ballistic missiles, not only short-range artillery rockets flying along ballistic trajectory, but also heavier ballistic missiles which are flying very high, exiting the Earth atmosphere and then re-entering. So this is very powerful weaponry, well integrated into very powerful systems. And this came as a shock for Pakistanis. Nothing they have deployed against India has worked. They could fire whatever they had in their arsenal, and they could only see that it gets shot down. Very little of their weaponry was getting through the Indian air defense systems. Less than 10%. So at that point you become desperate. You are getting hit all the time. Put yourself into their shoes. It's easy to conclude, you know. We are getting hit all the time, you know. Imagine two boxers. One is getting hit, smacked into his face, into his body, whatever, all the time, and it hurts. He has ever more pains, and when he tries to hit the other guy, what happens? Nothing. He either misses or the guy manages to defend himself, and so on and so on. So this is the situation that Pakistan was facing by the early morning of 10th of May. And that is where the realization came, if India continues like this, striking us like this for a few days longer, we are going to lose the capability of the armed forces to control the country. And this is why they have then sued for ceasefire. Again, Pakistani armed forces are very heavily indoctrinated. They are not doing this easily. It is just like Indian politicians, excuse me now for expression, politicians are not easily ordering an all-out attack, an all-out conventional strike on Pakistan, including such things like targeting underground nuclear facilities. So there, you have on both sides, you have some very rich, very massive, very dogmatic traditions, and it's very hard to move outside of this safe zone for politicians, for generals on both sides, and say, oh gosh, let's do something else. In Indian case, let's strike Pakistan all out. And on the Pakistani side, okay, we have to admit we have lost this round. There's no other way. Let's call New Delhi and sound a ceasefire for a ceasefire.
Yeah. I agree with you, because that's precisely my understanding of how it happened. But very quickly, one final question in that case, Tom. We've seen all these very detailed satellite pictures of the airstrikes on the air bases in Pakistan. There was, it was reasonable to believe that there must have been some aircraft or assets destroyed on the ground. The air chief referred to some of that yesterday as well, and he mentioned some specifics. Are we anywhere clearer to knowing what was destroyed on the ground, not in terms of hangars, but in terms of assets, aircraft, that kind of thing?
A lot. Because thinking that on such a base like, what was that, Bolari, for example, where an entire hangar was smashed, and there is just a relatively small hole on the roof, and then you can see just one F-16 inside or something like that, and thinking this was just one F-16 inside that hangar, that is very conservative, let's say this way. Because it's a big base and it's a squadron of 20 aircraft, or at least 16 aircraft. So you don't put just one or two aircraft into such a hangar. It's a desert, high temperature, sand, and so on. All of this is influencing very negatively the maintainability of the aircraft in question. So you put the aircraft into the hangar in order to protect them from elements. And when such a hangar then gets hit, then this hurts badly. We have had another situation where, I forgot now whether it was Polari or somewhere else, but also a hangar was hit and with Saab 2000 inside, and at least 4 officers, and who knows how many other ranks have been killed in that strike. So there were heavy losses for the Pakistani Air Force. Again, Islamabad wouldn't have sounded for ceasefire without a good reason, and this good reason is heavy losses, and deniability of capability of the armed forces to remain in control of the country. Because when that happens, Pakistan starts falling apart.
Yeah.
And this is what, as far as I'm informed from Islamabad, this is the crucial threat for them. This was the crucial threat in that moment, early on 10th of May. So they have calculated that if they go on like this, they cannot deploy the nuclear weaponry is a bluff. India called this bluff and hit them very heavily. The Air Force couldn't strike back on India, so nothing was working in these regards. And at some point in time, when they lose too many of command and control centers, when they lose too many of aircraft, then the overall capacity is still there, but capability is decreasing significantly. And then what?
Right.
One shouldn't forget this that Pakistan is, surviving thanks to its armed forces. It is a country which is, okay, you are not going to see this in public,
Very true.
Controlled by the armed forces, but it is actually armed forces which have their own country, so to say, that own the country as such. They have all the politicians, they have
it's incredible.
The economy and so on. Sorry.
What you're saying, Tom, is very much what our understanding is of how things actually played out and how things actually reached that point where a ceasefire was necessary. But it's always good to hear it from someone like you who understands the granular details of how the application of these weapons, the tactics deployed by the Indian Air Force and the Indian military actually brought about that situation after, what the Indian Air Force chief described as 80 to 90 hours of combat. So it's really incredible. Like you rightly said, Operation Sindoor is still very much on. I don't think there will be another flare-up soon, but who knows? This was a very, very hectic, kinetic operation, and our forces are still on alert. I'm sure the forces in Pakistan are still on alert. They're decoding what the Indian Air Force chief has said. But I thank you very much, Tom. Your analysis, your time, your wisdom on this shape-shifting, evolving story is always valuable to us here in India and to our viewers across the world. So thank you very much, Tom Cooper, for speaking to us on NDTV.
You're most welcome. Very much my pleasure.
From poll rigging to vote chori, it is Rahul Gandhi versus the Election Commission. Meanwhile, the Haryana and the Karnataka Election Commission have issued notices to Rahul Gandhi. The poll body, in the meanwhile, has fact-checked Rahul Gandhi's claim. Rahul reiterating his vote chori charge. Prime Minister Modi and the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh's retort to Donald Trump. Prime Minister Modi's Swadeshi push amid the tariff war. Rajnath Singh, he took a jibe at Donald Trump and said that no one can stop India. A war of words between the Karnataka government and the centre over the Namma Metro inauguration. Karnataka Chief Minister says that the maximum funding for the Namma Metro was by the state government. The BJP, in the meanwhile, has blamed the Congress for the delays. NDTV accesses the ED charge sheet against Robert Vadra. According to the charge sheet, Mr. Vadra earned 58 crore rupees illegally from this deal. Sources close to the investigation say that Mr. Vadra was evasive during the ED questioning. And relief and rescue operations continue after the devastating flash flood in Uttarkashi. NDTV gets you the details from Ground Zero. Hello and welcome. You're watching NDTV 24/7. I'm Osama Shab. The battle between India's top election body, the Election Commission, and the leader of opposition, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, it has gone from simmering to boiling point. Rahul Gandhi's explosive vote chori charge, it has put the Election Commission squarely in the political spotlight, prompting notices from Haryana to Karnataka and a public fact check from the Election Commission itself. The poll body says there is no evidence of double voting, but Rahul Gandhi, he isn't backing down. He is demanding answers and doubling down on his claims. The question now Is this a genuine fight for electoral integrity or a political slugfest over voter list? Listen in to some of the political reactions that have come in.
A perpetual youth of Indian politics who is consistently demeaning and degrading all the constitutional institution, a new avatar of Goebbels, is now trying to put forth his frustration of losing power by making an unnecessary, uncalled for and totally false allegation on election commission. आप औपचारिक रूप से कोई चीज वेरीफाई नहीं कर रहे हैं, ना चुनाव आयोग को तकनीकी दृष्टि से जो संवैधानिक रिक्वायरमेंट है उस चीज को करने का वो नहीं कर रहे हैं और आकर प्रचार कर रहे हैं।
राहुल जी ने जो सच्चाई रखी कि वोटर्स बढ़ाकर महाराष्ट्र की सरकार बनी है और इसीलिए सवाल का जवाब जब हम सवाल पूछ रहे चुनाव आयोग से तो भाजपा खड़ी हो जाती है, क्योंकि चोरों के दिल में डर है ना, जो चोरी किया है तो वो खुलासा करने आगे आ जाते हैं। गडकरी साहब ने जो कहा था कि 3.5 लाख वोट मेरे कम हो गए, मतलब क्या इसका मतलब यही था कि उनको टारगेट करके उसको यहां से चुनाव में गिराने के लिए कुछ प्लानिंग थी क्या, यह भी सवाल किया जाता है।
All right, I have Mr. Gopal Krishna Agarwal, the spokesperson of the BJP. I also have Sujata Paul, the spokesperson of the Congress. Let me come across to Mr. Gopal Krishna Agarwal first. Sir, the Congress says that, look, this is something that we are addressing the Election Commission. We are trying to figure out the irregularities or the vote chori charge that they have leveled against the Election Commission. Why is the BJP so worried? Why is the BJP answering on behalf of the Election Commission?
No, we are not answering on behalf of Election Commission. We are just saying when the Rahul Gandhi says that this Election Commission is doing it on behalf of BJP to benefit BJP, he himself is pulling us into this controversy. If he has only any grudge with Election Commission, he can go to the Election Commission. Election Commission is giving answer. We are not answering on behalf of Election Commission. But when he goes for a political statement that the India's democracy is at peril, the India's vote chori ho gaye, so that is undermining Indian democracy. That is which harms us. That is which harms the nation. It's a political statement that he is giving, and that we have to counter. If he goes simply to the Election Commission, goes to the court, files his cases, follow the rule of the law, follow the procedures, he has every right to question Election Commission. Nobody is objecting. But why he is assigning this action to benefit BJP? He is saying Election Commission is doing it on behalf of BJP, to benefit BJP. That is
so
very
what Mr. Rahul Gandhi and the Congress is also saying, sir, is that, look, it is ultimately helping the BJP. It is ultimately in favor of the BJP is the reason why the BJP is possibly answering all those questions.
No, but how it is favoring BJP? He has to prove it. He may say that there are certain anomalies in the voter list. There are certain gaps and lapses in the voter list. Everybody knows that. I am a politician. You must have voted. Everybody has found that there are complications with some names or some polling booth, etc. They are regular process, and it is before every election, electoral rolls are updated. People are asked to give information if they have any objections, somebody else's name, even all BLA BLA people are asked to sit in the counter, near the counter, and see that if there is any bogus voting, they can challenge on the spot. All these processes are there, but no process is being followed, and simply public statements are being given. No nothing is being given to the election commission. Whatever is being given, election commission, as Sumoto also answered.
All
but
right.
why he is undermining the whole democratic institutions, and he is at the global platforms also saying
All right.
that India's
Let me go across to
democracy
Sujata
has
Paul.
been
Let me go across to
completely
Sujata Paul.
destroyed.
Sujata ji, why is, as per the BJP, why is Mr. Gandhi undermining the democratic process?
There is no question of undermining the democratic process. If you are a patriotic Indian, you are going to protect your democracy and you are going to save your constitutional bodies also. And no constitutional body is above being transparent. It has to make sure that it is transparent. And let's talk about facts here. The Election Commission is supposed to conduct elections, right? So if that is the case, then they need to clarify every doubt that every person has or any person has. Now here, what has happened is every time the Congress party has approached the Election Commission, they have, all the other opposition parties, they have just undermined them, never answered their questions. And we heard Mr. Rajiv Kumar, the favorite of Mr. Modi, getting extensions and reciting Shero Shairi during press conferences. Now, I'm not amused, but I'm appalled at what the BJP spokesperson just said, that the reason why they are defending the EC because they are being targeted. No, you can defend yourself, but let the EC be. Let the EC defend itself. They are not fact checkers, one. Second, this story began when this vote chori was caught in Chandigarh. Do you remember Anil Masih, the way he went about vote chori karna? And at that time, the Supreme Court gave strict instructions to you all also, to us also, to the country, that this will not be accepted. Now, when the Supreme Court had said that the body which selects the election commissioners needed to comprise of the opposition as well as the ruling party and the Chief Justice of India, what happened? They changed it. They made sure that the balance tilted towards the ruling party, that is the BJP, because they had made up their minds that they would manipulate the votes. And last point is that after Rahul Gandhiji's explosive revelations, the BJP has gone berserk, completely berserk. And the ECI, they are asking for the affidavit from Rahul Gandhiji instead of answering questions. That's what the BJP is doing. If you look at what they have done, they have removed the digital roles which they had put up for after the Bihar SIR. Why did they do it? Why is it that 3 states list cannot be accessed? This clearly shows that BJP
sees this
and ECI
as an
are
attack.
colluding.
The BJP sees this as an attack on the integrity of India's electoral process, while the Congress, it says otherwise. Thank you to the both of you for sharing your views on the show. All right, shifting our focus to our other big story that we are tracking amidst the US claim that India's oil purchases, they were fueling resources for Russia's war against Ukraine. India has consistently maintained its position and has been aimed at energy security. It is aimed at global stability. And it has also pointed out, India has pointed out the lack of reason in the argument that India was fueling Russia's war machine. In fact, India's ambassador to the United States, Vinay Mohan Kwatra, he said that he had shared the Indian perspective with Senator Lindsey Graham, who had urged Prime Minister Modi to emphasize on President Putin to end the war in Ukraine. And the meeting is important as it could be a step towards a possible thaw in the Indo-US ties, especially the trade ties, which have been hit by tariffs after President Trump's criticism over India buying oil. Meanwhile, I'm currently joined by Mr. Arun Kumar Singh, the former ambassador to the United States. Mr. Singh, thank you very much for speaking to us. Washington, it has once again flagged India's Russian oil purchases as what they call fueling the war machine. But India says it's about energy security, it is about global stability. How do you see this clash of narratives, sir?
So at the moment, I think the US wants to generate extra pressure on Russia Because, President Trump had said that within 24 hours he's going to resolve that conflict, and that he'll have some conversations with President Putin, and there'll be a ceasefire and things will start working out. So now they've realized that the approach they had hasn't worked and hasn't failed, because they have to address some of the objective concerns that Russia has, and so they're nowhere near reaching there, because there's also a difference of opinion between US, Europe, and Ukraine on how to handle this issue. So when they've seen the failure of that policy, the normal US approach is to blame somebody else. So they're looking for somebody else to blame. And therefore, at the moment, either they could have done more sanctions on Russia. They don't want to do that because they want to have some dialogue with Russia. They could have done sanctions on China or raised tariff on China. They don't want to do that because China has displayed countervailing power by controlling the supply of rare earths, magnets, critical materials, which the US needs. And the US is in discussion with China to ease up on some of the export controls. So they felt that, okay, so at this stage, let's direct the pressure on Russia through India, and therefore impose the tariffs of India. Now, when they do something which is obviously not justified, if you look at the figures, because as the Ministry of External Affairs spokesman pointed out, Europe is buying more from Russia than India is buying. US itself is buying uranium from Russia. So when this happens, they start creating a narrative. Some narrative can sell. So now this is the narrative, that India is fueling the Russian war machine. And there is no basis to that. But that's the narrative they construct to try and justify what they're doing for other reasons. So that's what they've come up with. But as you pointed out, I think the challenge here is that through this process, they are having a negative impact on perceptions in India related to the US relationship. Historically, there is a memory in India of US being a coercive and unreliable partner. Now, for the last 25 years, US has tried to come out of that image and has been supportive of India in different contexts. But with the kind of approach they have adopted now, in India, it has resurrected the feeling that US is a coercive partner and unreliable partner. So I would say that the US is not really levying penalties or tariffs on India. It is levying tariffs and penalties on the US-India relationship. And there'll be consequences also for the US. So that's the situation we are dealing with. But they are approaching it in a short-term way, looking at addressing their own immediate needs, concerns, and President Trump's politics. We know where he wants to show that he's resolving conflicts all over the world. Now, he brought in the presidents of Armenia, Azerbaijan. He's going to meet President Putin next week in Alaska, and that, he should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. So there is a Trump politics playing out. And all these are consequences of that.
A very important point that you have pointed out is that the US and the European Union, they continue trading with Russia. And this is something that India has also mentioned, yet they don't face any such moral scrutiny. Do you think this double standard is being acknowledged in some manner privately in Washington, even if it is not being admitted publicly?
I'm sure they're aware of it. They know all the facts. In fact, if you recall, President Trump was asked that question at a press conference, that India says US is buying uranium, and he had no answer. So he said, I'm not aware of it. I'll get back to you. So they're aware of it. But it's just a question of, trying to use your power to put the blame on somebody else and try and take away attention from what you're doing yourself. And then you can make the argument that if you're so concerned about norms in international relations, how is it that you're reaching out in a major way to a country that everybody knows has been a supporter of terrorism, which is Pakistan?
Yeah.
And in the context of Afghanistan, the US itself earlier had repeatedly blamed Pakistan for providing support to Taliban that was killing US soldiers. And that relationship went up and down. So in the context of Pakistan, despite support of terrorism from Pakistan, because they want to deal with Pakistan for their own reasons, they don't pay attention to that aspect. So, in international relations, it's norms, principles are used to justify what you want to do otherwise.
Senator Graham also said that India has influence over Vladimir Putin and that India should use that influence wisely. Based on your assessment, Ambassador, how much influence does India realistically have especially in Moscow's strategic decisions?
Look, ultimately, each country takes decisions based on its assessment of its own interests. Russia takes decision based on its assessments of its own interests. We can convey to them our experience, our perspective, what we are hearing from others, but they'll make their own assessment. Similarly, India, when it takes decisions, if you, for example, Operation Sindoor, we took our own decision based on our own assessment of interest, not because A, B, or C said something or the other. So each country decides based on that. Of course, you talk to others, you hear from them. So, it's just an argument that Senator Graham might want to make, that India has influence, because they want to blame India if Russia is not responding the way the US wants. But India certainly, you saw President Putin called the Indian Prime Minister, spoke to him about his conversation with the US Representative Steve Witkoff, telling him about his visit to Alaska. So conversations go on because you want to share perspectives. But I don't think President Putin is going to be influenced or condition his decision based on what anybody else is saying to him.
Okay, one final question from you, Ambassador Singh. If at all, the talks between Putin and Donald Trump, if it doesn't work out the way both the parties want it to, how do you think it would affect India, and especially United States' stand as far as India is concerned?
So I would say this. First, of course, we would hope that something positive emerges. But, it's going to be very difficult because the US has not really taken the Europeans and Ukrainians on board. They are not present at the meeting. And so if they feel their interests are not protected, they would oppose whatever comes out of that. And in the past also, you remember President Trump, even in his first term, had met President Putin. And not much came out of that. He met on several occasions with the North Korean leader. And eventually that series of talks also didn't work out. So it may work, it may not work, but that doesn't matter. I think eventually India will take its own decisions based on what is the value of the India-US relationship and what is the value of the India-Russia relationship. And we are not going to condition our decision related to Russia based on what the US is saying. Because ultimately you have to make your own assessment. And in India, I'm sure there is a memory of Russia having been a very reliable partner of India in the past. At moments of crisis, a very important defense supply partner. At the moment, very important energy partner. Now, US is also an important. And certainly we want to build more. It's our largest trading partner, largest investment partner, largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora. Certainly we'd like to do more with the US, a very important technology partner. But that doesn't mean that we base our decision based on what the US says. Because their politics changes. If you saw in the Biden administration, for example, the Secretary of State said that we understand India's compulsions related to Russia. India's relationship with Russia developed at the time when the US was not willing to be that kind of a partner. Or the National Security Advisor said with India, we are playing the long game. So that was a different approach. Right now, it is the politics of President Trump that is impacting on the decision making. And we have to deal with that, keeping in mind very much our own interests, our autonomy of decision makings. And I think ultimately people realize that India is strong enough to take its own decisions. So that's very important for us to sustain that image.
All right. Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh, thank you very much for speaking with NDTV, and it's always a pleasure to have you on NDTV, sir. All right, time now for a very short break. More news and updates on the other side. Haryana and Karnataka Election Commission issues notices to Rahul Gandhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Swadeshi push amid tariff war. Karnataka Chief Minister says that maximum funding was by the state over the Namma Metro controversy. NDTV accesses ED charge sheet against Robert Vadra.
Presented by Canara Bank. Together we can.
तू ही तो है जिसकी सच्चाई वाली क्लैरिटी की वजह से मैं आज यहाँ हूँ।
गोल्ड प्लस सिल्वॉक्सी मिरर्स, ऐसी क्लैरिटी कि आपको सिर्फ सच नजर आए, चाहे कितने भी साल बीत जाएं।
Mohit, you are known for your music. All your films, musics stay with us till today. I'm a millennial and those music are kind of music. So whenever we say Mohit Suri film aa raha hai, we know the music will be good, right? It's a given. So you really work hard. But Is this always like how you create your music? You need everything in place, the mood, the lighting, even when the person is in the studio and just singing. And also, how did you select your musicians that this person's voice is perfect for this song?
That's what I think, the amount you give to a song, that's how long it will last, I think. Everyone does the programming, everyone writes the words, everyone makes the thing. But the thing is how much you give, how much of heart you give to the lyrics or to the music or to the melody or to the singing. That's how long the song will last, is what I genuinely feel. If you don't give that love, you're not going to get it back. It's just a simple debit and credit procedure, I think, with the audience. I genuinely feel I don't have any special skill. I don't know any scale or anything else. It's just that I enjoy that process a lot. Give me an evening to just go for a film